guys, we're going to make some hanging planters that we're going to use to actually plant some seeds in. So we're going to use clay. You guys that have been in my class before, you understand what clay is. I try to do a clay project every year. I know some of you guys probably missed out on doing clay last year because of this whole crazy pandemic time that we're living in. But we're going to do a clay project this year that I think you guys are really going to enjoy. This is the clay that we're going to use. It's a gray clay. When it comes out of the bag, it's really soft and moldable. It feels kind of cold when you touch it because it's got a lot of water in it. The clay we use comes from the earth. People dig it up and it can be used and molded after they take it to a factory and they clean it up a bit. So this is called white modeling clay, even though right out of the bag it looks gray. When it's fired in the kiln, it comes out white, like this. So when I say fire in the kiln, what I mean is I take your clay project that you make and I put it in a machine that's called a kiln, and the kiln heats it up to about 1,000 degrees, and there's some science that happens there. The clay's white and it is really hard, kind of like your dishes at home. A pinch pot for this project. To make a pinch pot, you're going to take it in your hands, use the palm of your hand, and you need to squish it into a nice uniform or even ball. So as you're working, you'll notice that it gets kind of wrinkly. You can take your finger or your thumb and smooth out the wrinkles. That'll help with making your ball of clay even all the way around. So be sure you turn it and look at it on all the sides to make sure that you're smoothing it out. I don't recommend rolling it like this or rolling it on the table because a lot of times when you do that, it's going to end up having a point on one side. So it's better if you keep it in your hand. So when you have a pretty even, smooth ball of clay, the next step is going to be to stick your thumb in it. So you're just going to sink your thumb into the ball of clay like that. For mine, I want my bowl to have a round bottom. So I'm not going to put it down on the table very hard. I want it to keep its round shape. So I'm going to work with my pinch pot in my hand. I'm going to take my thumb and my fingers, sort of like a duck, and I'm going to put my thumb inside the pot and I'm going to pinch with my fingers. As I pinch, I'm turning it around and around. Do that starting at the bottom first. It's hard to tell, but my thumb is all the way in. I'm actually kind of touching the bottom of the pot. So pinch all the way around. When you feel it starting to get kind of thin at the bottom, then you're going to move your hand up the side a little bit more, and you're going to keep pinching. You don't want your pot walls or the sides to be this thick. These are too thick, right? These are thicker than my thumb. You're going to want to get your sides of your pot to be about as thick or as thin as your pinky finger, okay? So you're going to pinch it all the way around. As you're pinching it, it's getting bigger, okay? It's growing. So as it grows, you want to be sure that you don't get any thick spots or any thin spots. So you're going to pinch around and around and around. And as the clay gets bigger, I'm moving my finger up the side. You can set it on the table and you can use both hands at the same time to kind of mold your clay in the shape that you want. That's getting pretty thin. I don't want it to be too much thinner than this because we're going to be making holes in it to hang it from some pieces of string. So if it's too thin, it might be really easy to break. After you get your planter or your little bowl for your plant, the shape that you want and the thickness that you want, the next step is going to be to add some pieces of clay to your planter so that it looks like it has a face. I would recommend not making anything that sticks out too far. For example, you don't want a nose like Squidward that sticks out a mile away or an elephant or anything like that, because anything that sticks off of your clay pot is going to be in danger of breaking off really easily, okay? So you're going to need a little bit of extra clay, and you're going to need a fork, a pencil, a sponge, and a little bit of water. We use water to make clay stick together. If you don't put water and make some marks on clay when you stick two pieces of clay together, the clay just falls right apart. Let me explain a little bit more. So if I take this piece of clay and I stick it to this piece of clay, it sticks right now. But when the clay dries, it gets really dusty, and that is just gonna fall right off. It's not gonna stay. So to stick two pieces of clay together, what you're gonna do is dip a fork in the water that you have at your table. You're gonna scratch on the piece of clay, okay, on one piece and on the other piece. And then that water sinks into those little scratch marks and it makes it stick together. Okay, now when this dries, all of those little bitty lines go like this and they kind of sink into each other and they get stuck. That's what will make your clay pot really strong. You can also rub those pieces together with your finger. So if I want this piece and this piece to look like they were one piece of clay, then I can rub away that little line. That's where your sponge comes in. If you take your sponge, you can also smooth away the line, okay? You don't ever want to get your clay that wet. Oop, I almost dropped it in the water. You don't ever want your clay to be drippy wet, because if it gets drippy wet, it starts to melt and it turns back into mud and you can't work with it if it's muddy. Okay, so now I'm gonna make a face for my pot because I want my flower pot to have a real happy face. Okay guys, the last step is to make holes that we're going to use to hang our planter from. So the easiest way to make a hole in the side of your pot is to use a pencil.